Well, welcome. It's Friday, and I'm Fred. So we have an opportunity to chat, answer some questions, and see what happened or happens. So I want to say really quickly, what I normally do is teach a little something, and then after I teach it, we take questions. But I've had some of you share with me that you keep thinking, I have a question, but it'll sound dumb or nobody else is thinking it or whatever. And I want you to know that, yeah, that's not the way to think. The way to think is ask these questions. Maybe they've been asked 100 times. I may not know the answer. Maybe someone else knows. But questions are really kind of the trick. And that's what I'd like to mention to you. So there's this universal dynamic or this dynamic in the universe. And the way it works is there are all these forces, like thinking the physics or the physical universe are interplaying, gravity and magnetism and who knows, black holes and whatever else. But things basically are in motion because of the interplay of these forces. And when something gets out of balance, it's trying to get back into balance. Well, that is the cool thing about a good question. A question creates an imbalance that resolves with an answer. Kind of like, in our writing course, we talk about knock knock. Well, knock knock in our culture actually generates an imbalance that doesn't feel right until someone says, who's there? So a question's the same way. If you ask a question, then your mind will start working on a solution. And that means the more profound the question, the more profound the solution. So anyway, I hope you are online. I know there's a delay in the system. I'm hoping you have some questions, and certainly say hi. I'd love to know what parts of the world any of you are in. So, and of course, it's a live stream, so people kind of come online, tell your friends, hey, we're doing this thing. I'm going to begin, if I can figure out how to do, if I can figure out how to do chat. Someone's from London. I take it that's England, which is awesome, or the UK. Yeah, I want to put in, Okay, so here's a question I received in the mail. So I'll get to that one in a second. Well, Dr. Libran, I'll be able to restream tomorrow. Question here. Hopefully you can get to it. Yeah, good. Yeah, so, and that's great. If you can leave a question or write me a question, I'm glad to do my best to answer them. So this one, let's see if I can do this properly. So I'll ask a question right here. Hopefully you can get to it. What were your daily expectations for math other than 2 hours a day? Did you try to have them accomplish? There's more to it. I don't know how to read it. But I'm figuring it out. Let me just read this aloud to you. So the rest of it's just a lengthy thing. It says, so not sure I'll be able to make the list to it. Hopefully you can get to it. What are your daily expectations for math other than 2 hours per day? Did you try to have them accomplish 2 lessons during that time, or just 1, or something else? What a great question. Also, if they finish their 1 or 2 lessons in less than the prescribed time, did they get done with math early, get to be done with math early, or did they need to keep working until the 2 hours were up? Thanks for these live Q&A sessions. Really enjoying them, Ken. Good. So Ken, it's a great question. And I'll tell you how we came around to resolving it. The challenge is how much can a child reasonably be expected to do within a time frame. So like if you were having them read, let's just pick on reading. you've got your kids reading, let's say an hour, and you want them to read like 1/4 of War and Peace. Okay. So that's not really fair. By the same token, if you just gave them one page from War and Peace, assume they're older, and they had a whole hour to do it, there wouldn't be a challenge in that. So what you're doing is you're trying to balance their competence and the challenge. That's the game. So in math, what we came to was we wanted them to do the number of problems they could do in a 2-hour period. And we broke it up in our context with math, reading math. So in a 2-hour period, what can they get done and maintain a 90 or better? So we counted off for mistakes and we counted off for error, when they were just wrong. Sometimes they're careless mistakes. Now, I say this to say what that's doing is just kind of keeping the system adjusted. When you go from a 5-6 to 7-6, when you change any of the books, the first probably quarter of the book, at least, is actually a review of the previous year. So usually those lessons they can do quickly. When it gets more difficult, it slows down. So if a child gets into a difficult area and it's really tough and they're working, why do you care about, or why we ask, why would we care if they did a lesson or a half lesson? If they really mastered 3 problems in a day and they were difficult and mastered and as a foundation, I'd be happy with that. What we're constantly doing, I think as they got advanced, it would vary, but it seems like they might be doing a half lesson in Saxon and the problems like the middle math stuff or whatever when they got into advanced stuff. But it's going to depend. I have a kid that majored in mathematics and economics, had a perfect SAT score. He could just move faster. He passed his brother who was or caught up to him, who was like 3 years ahead of him or 2. So all I'm getting at is when you think about this game with math, with writing, with anything, you want to put a time limit on it. That's crucial. And with that time limit, you want to make sure the challenge is appropriate. So like in reading, I'll test how many words they can read in a minute, right? And when I understand that, I can reasonably understand. Let's say they're going to read an hour. And they can read a page an hour. I don't do 60 pages. I'll back off that, 10% or so, because in my mind, just like you asked, if they get through early, more power to them. And if they get through early, they can move to the next subject. So they have more time for that subject. Or if they're more efficient, they just get out of school earlier. Now, there's constantly a change or adjustment of the system. So we've got to be totally aware of that reality. Some books are going to be harder and some math is going to be more difficult. So I hope that helped. That's the best answer I've got for this moment. Good. I'm sorry about this. I'm having allergy challenges. So let me read this if I can find it. This first. Or maybe that was the one. Is that the one I just posted? I apologize. Yeah. So that was my question. So now I need your questions. And again, these questions are crucial because they create a tension resolution system. You ask a question, generates an answer, and so I actually did a little research on a few questions people commonly ask, but I way more would rather answer all of your questions. And I know there's a delay in the system, so I'm happy to wait. While I'm waiting for your brilliant question, so I kind of research what common questions people are being asked these days. So I have a little sheet of paper here. So like the top 10 questions that I could find that people are asking commonly among homeschoolers The first one was, how can I balance homeschooling with other responsibilities, such as work or household tasks? All right, so that's actually a really big question. Oh, good, I got a chat GPT question. How do you balance things? Here's where you start. You start with realizing that balance does not mean equal amounts, right? So, like, I like to use the example of soup. If you put salt in soup, you don't want 50% salt, right? Salt in soup needs to be the right amount for the soup, maybe to taste, but it's the right amount of the right thing. So when we see questions out here like, how can I balance homeschooling with other responsibilities such as work and household tasks? The issue isn't balance the way we think about a balancing act, weight on the right side. It's the right amount of the right thing. I'll tell you that the absolute secret to this, the absolute secret is hierarchy. So it's not so much how do I balance these things, but how do they line up? What's the highest priority? What's the next highest? What's the next highest? What's the next highest? And it's not a battle of A and B, A and Z. It's more like A and B. So you can have a general and a colonel, And so in this hierarchy, in the structure, it actually works. So when you think about your homeschooling and planning things, you've got, even inside of homeschooling, is there a hierarchy about reading, writing, or math? For us, the hierarchy was math is more important to be consistent with. So we do math on Saturdays. That was the only thing we did. Reading, they would do outside of it. Reading's important, but there are other contexts for reading to happen. So we knew from a homeschool viewpoint, if we didn't have the math in there, the kids wouldn't get the math done. Reading, people can find books and things they like, so they get reading done. Writing, some like to write, some don't. So that was a hierarchy issue too. The house orderliness, all right, that's an important thing, but we didn't put that ahead of school, and we more fit it into overall the training we were trying to do with the kids. It could be the same thing in a marriage. Look, if there's a priority in your relationship, you and your spouse probably need to go on a date, or we at least had a rule that we didn't do a family bedroom. Our room was our room. You're not supposed to be in that room. That's our room. We want to come out of there smiling, and you wonder, I don't know what goes on in that room, but whatever it is, I'm going to grow up and get me one of them spouses and get me one of them rooms, kind of that thing. So it's a hierarchy game. So you want to think through, what is the hierarchy? What's the most important, next most important, next most important, all important, but in that sequence. Okay. Hope that helps. Okay. What's your opinion? Here we go. What's your opinion on chat GPT and its impact on education? I'm still formulating that. I play with it a good bit, and it's quite fascinating. I mean, really fascinating to get into theological debates and other things. I've done complex things, some logic things. It's still learning. It can get caught contradicting itself, or at least I've been able to get it to. It may not now, it was a few weeks ago. But you look at this and you go, my goodness, in a way, I would say it's kind of like the calculator. So a calculator came along in math, right? And it really allows us to do more, just like with computers. I remember the story of Feynman at MIT. He was a graduate assistant. He was on the Manhattan Project, Nobel Prize winner type, I think. Sure. And he was working for a professor, and they were doing calculations, he and another grad student. And they finally came to him and realized that they had calculated on their calculation process, and it was going to be like, this will take us 30 years to be able to calculate what you want us to do, something like that, something ridiculous. And so they could stop the project. They just needed the machines to come up. So the machines allow us to do a lot. There's a lot that things like chat GPT and AI is going to do for us. And I don't think it can stop. We're going to stop it or want to. But the problem with calculators, just like with our kids learning, we didn't let them play with calculators until they got much older and more advanced math, because we wanted them to actually understand it. So there's this game where it can make us so lazy we have no idea at all what's going on. So we're not technically educated. We are technicians. We're able to punch buttons, but we don't really get how it works. And so I think it comes out to the goal. If you want a skill in mathematics and a skill in writing and a skill in reading, having AI read for you, write for you, and do your math is never going to be a good educational strategy. Now, on the other side, I'll just say this. If I understand causality right, the creature can't exceed the creator. So all this AI, I think, is still dependent on our creativity. We have to frame it and set it up. And so it's kind of a tool. It's probably, it's dramatic because it has the wow factor, like the internet first did when I remember it. So it's like, wow, it can do this. And yet in the same breath, it probably isn't going to quite pull off everything you can imagine. So there's a lot of wait and see and play with it. But I can say this, real students are going to have to learn to really write for themselves, really read for themselves, really do math for themselves, or they're not going to be educated. And it's going to create its own problems, just like you might expect. Whew. That's the best answer I got right now. Sorry. That's all I got. All right. Not sure if I already did this one. I got to go straight down. Sorry. I'm getting there. It's only technology. Here we go. All right. So I'm reading your material on reading, linear and lateral. How can you help a person who struggles with require a linear sequential approach? So what they're talking about here of linear and lateral is in reading a book. One of the tricks, what we tend to do is we tend to read. Let me grab a book. Oh, here's one called The Independent Homeschool. So when we read, if I can get this up here, it may be backwards to y'all, I can't remember. Linear means they come in order, line by line, right? It could be word by word. It could even be letter by letter. So I could pull this out and read THEY space WON' space LEARN space asterisk MY space KIDS space. So that's kind of linear. And when we're reading, the problem is we're trying to put a pattern together, and patterns are not put together well in a linear fashion. That's more what they call inductive reasoning, and it's fine. It's very important. But when you're wanting to understand an overall passage or what you're looking at, you don't have to take the information in order. You can look around. You can even take a passage and look at things in it, like the characters. So if we took something like the prodigal son, okay? So we're asking, how can you help a person who struggles with learning how to think laterally? Okay, the way they do it is like with the prodigal son. So if you want to study that passage, the son leaving, coming back, fatted calf, all the rest, Luke 10 or whatever it is, you can look at just the characters in it. So when you look at a passage, let's ask who are the characters in it. And so there's the dad, there's the prodigal son that leaves, there's the brother. There are some servants in there. There is his foreign benefactor who works for away. Then there's the fatted calf. There's some pigs. There's a goat mentioned, or a sheep, goat. I think the brother wanted you killed a goat for us. So when you start looking at these different pieces, that allows that part of your brain, which naturally works that way, to start looking at the pieces. You can also then not only look at the main characters, but what's the relationship between them? What's the father's relationship to the prodigal, to the other son? What's the relationship of the son and his friends? He does mention them, another character. All of those pieces are still there. And you're even doing it just like with word jumbles. You might see a word that's jumbled, and then you can sort it out, these Wordle games and all the rest, to what it means. So it's a natural capacity, but it's practiced by looking at the different elements and then trying to fit them together. You still want to read through sequentially. I'm not denying that. But for good reading to happen, you've got to learn to think laterally and piece it together. I tell people when they're, in counseling and coaching, they start telling me their story. I look at them, I say, hey, listen, you don't have to tell this in order. I can put it back together. And you can just see, go, because everybody gets caught trying to tell it in order, because a lot of times you need footnotes. Well, this happened back here, and this is what I was thinking was going to happen, and all the rest. So I would just practice in passages, looking at the different elements. What are the key players? What are the actions involved, the key verbs? What is the movement through time? And I'll talk about this in our writing course. So anyway, that's how I do it. And it's a skill. It's just something to practice. It's just something to practice. And that's how we develop skills. And you develop these skills and they combine together and you're golden. So hope that helps. Hope that was the question. Let's see. I'm working on how this works. More creative. Ooh, I like that one. But let me go in the right order. All right. Got it figured out. I apologize. How can we help our children become more creative? How do we do that? How do we help our children become more creative? Well, what you need to first think through is, what does it mean to be creative? So creativity, honestly, works on a bell curve too. We want to pretend that everybody's equally creative, but they're not. That's just not a thing. And yet, being more creative is legitimate from wherever they are to something more, like a better reader, better at math. So this is a skill. So here's creativity. One of their tests is like the uses of a brick test. So what can you use a brick for? You can use it as sandpaper. You can use it on the side of a building. Use the doorstop. You can put it in the back of a toilet to raise the water level to save water. You could probably use it as a hammer. You could probably use it as a protective weapon. You could probably use it in a class as an illustration. What else is left? You could probably use it to scratch your name into a tree or a log or something like that. Here's the problem, and I know how to do that kind of stuff. I have a knack for it, but it's not creativity. That is divergent thinking about different things, whatever, but it's not creativity. Creativity is where it's practiced. Okay. It's literally where it's practiced. The most powerful thing you can do for your kids to make them more creative is to teach them how to picture, plan, and act on accomplishing a goal. So a goal would be they're going to create something that didn't exist. Could be a paper, could be an art project, could be anything, even a garden. If you have like no flowers and then flowers, good job. So creativity would be, you got to picture what you want it to look like. And once you get a clear picture of what you want to look like and you want it, you can feel, yeah, that'd be good. And then you think about where you are, what I have to work with. Well, I've got dirt and rocks and whatever. And then you come up with a plan, a few steps. So I'm going to take the rocks out. I'm going to mix new dirt in with the old dirt. I'm going to pull out all the weeds, probably the weeds first. And then I'm going to plant the plants, or maybe I'm going to research the plants. And then I'm going to plant the plants. And then I'm going to water them and cheer for them and keep weeding. So that process itself will help your children way more than anything else. It's not just being crazy inventive. It's practical. It's coming up with solutions and inventions and insights that you can use in life. That is the essence of real creativity. Does that make sense? That's kind of a short answer, but That's close. What do you think about learning Latin as an extra? My husband thinks it'd be good for our kids. What are your thoughts? Well, as one who took Latin uh, for 2 or 3 years, so I've studied Latin and Greek and Hebrew and Spanish and English. I think that's it. I hope that's plenty. Uh, I think Latin and Greek are awesome. Latin in particular. What I'd say is that's powerful is when you learn Latin roots. Each root you learn can give you like 10 or up to 20 more vocabulary words. And it's very helpful. So, like a word like confidence. Okay. So, confidence. Want people confident. Well, confidence is broken down into con and fide. And con means with, and fide means faith. And so, with faith, and it's not saying that's exactly the meaning, but it gives some flavor to the word and also a way to remember it for me. So, confidi with faith, confidence has you have a certain amount of faith in your abilities, situation, what's going to happen. And so, there's a confidence going on. So, I think studying Latin, at least learning a lot of roots at the very least, is great. Otherwise, any language that you study is going to make you learn to be analytical in terms of wrestling with it, which is fine, but it's not really how to learn to speak a language. Learning to speak a language is a different game. But Latin, as we say, is dead. So it's a study language, and it does show parts of speech and all the rest. I don't get excited about studying languages until, for analytical type stuff until much later on, where their brains work and they play with the grammar and all the rest. But I would say in the meantime, all of you would be dramatically influenced by letting them just learn some Latin vocabulary. And if there's some Latin, they, find a good book that walks through some principles of it, groovy. Anything, almost anything you learn is going to be incredibly helpful. All right, hope that was helpful. Struggles with tasks that require a linear approach. I think I addressed that. Am I going backwards? Nope. Ooh, how did did you allow your children to read books involve magic, spells, wizards, etc.? I remember Forrest one day came in and he writes books on this kind of stuff. Now children's books. You might check them out. Forrest Librand or Forrester Librand, you may go by. So I remember one day we came in and he had a Harry Potter book and he had stabbed it with a letter opener or something. Said it's evil. It was kind of an interesting conversation. And of course, we had other parents who were their kids were in school saying, "Oh, they're reading Harry Potter. They read anything. I'll let them read anything that they'll read because they weren't reading at all." All right, so here's how I think about this sort of thing. It first came up with Ursula and the Little Mermaid. I remember moms in the church were calling me as the pastor and saying, "Ursula's scary. Should they watch it?" And I remember back then going, "Well, what happens to Ursula? Does it turn out good or not so good?" And the answer was not so good. And I go, "All right, so stories where bad people get bad results, good people get good results. I think that's what we're trying to learn." The problem with wizards and magic and all the rest of this stuff, depending on your orientation, can play into magical thinking, can play into, I don't know, demonic stuff or support of it. I was never that fond of Halloween. I think all our kids are, but it wasn't something I was thrilled. I don't even like April 1st. I don't like a designated day where we're allowed to lie and trick people. That's just me. I'm just telling you where I'm coming from. What we did with these things like movies and books is I didn't mind them reading them as long as we evaluated them. What was good in here, what was bad. So commonly with movies, whether it's Star Wars or Harry Potter, the movies, I didn't want the kids left out of the culture exactly, but we would go to Rosa's, order nachos, and sit down and debrief the movie. What do we believe? What was right? What was wrong? What didn't work? What did work? And we would really spend energy analyzing and understanding the movie, the good, the bad, and the ugly or indifferent. And in that way, I think we equip the kids to be discerning. That's what we're aiming for. And of course, you got to do age appropriate, because some things will scare them to death, when they're little. So you're going to have to figure that piece out. But that's what we did. We didn't mind them reading them, but we would debrief the book with them age appropriate. All right, Elizabeth, did you allow your children to read? Or I just did that one. Sorry, Elizabeth. I hope that was helpful. Also, did you do a specific Bible curriculum with kids? I did not. So the kids were involved with Awana, which is a Bible memorization program. They all got Timothy Awards. So that means they memorized around 800 verses by the time they got through that program. So they had that, and they obviously went to church, they had Sunday school, etc. What we did for Bible study is I need to post this somehow, because I'm happy to give you a copy. I developed a way to approach Bible study from talking to a missionary to Manila in the Philippines, and how they did it. And I liked the idea, and then I tweaked it. But what we would do is we would, I generated, because I had kids, they're 9 years apart. So we might have 5 up to 14-year-old, or as they move up. So how do you do a Bible study that engages all of them? And here's what we figured out. We would have a question, and the question would then lead to a discussion. And then I'd show them a Bible verse that addressed that question. And then we would talk about it and talk about how to apply it, like one application for all of us. So like one of them was, how do we make ourselves stupid? So that'd be a question. And the kids would talk about it, not studying and hanging around other people that are stupid. And I mean, you may not use the word stupid in your family. I apologize if that's a thing. But there's a verse that uses it, so I'm sticking with that verse. And that, they would say, like not asking questions. Who knows what all they said? They said all that. And then we'd open the verse, and it's like Proverbs 12:1, I think it is, or 3. It's right there. And it says, he who does not listen to rebuke is stupid, or listen to being challenged. In other words, if someone can't challenge you that you might be wrong, you're going to be stupid. And so they'd get the point after that discussion pretty powerfully, and then we'd talk about how to apply it. Now, the way I did it is I would find a verse I wanted to study, and then I'd invent a question for it. And so I have like a starter kit. I guess the easiest thing to do, if you send me an email, I'll send it to you. So it's a PDF, a couple of sheets. I don't have the link here, but it'll give you like 40 starter kits. And then once a week, we would just substitute out reading time for Bible time. Now, I will tell you this also, the way I taught Bible is if an event came up, or situation, or question, I might have an instant explanation of a passage that I knew something about. So they might have issues about, what do you do if you are good with God, but you sin? And I'd show them 1 John 1:9. Well, you confess, and that kind of fixes the familial aspect of relationship. So there were surprise moments in study too, but that's pretty much how we did it. So good, great advice about something. Awesome. Am I familiar with classical conversations? If so, do you like it and recommend it? So classical conversations. Yeah, I'm a fan of the classical model. We adopted Robinson after playing with thinking through classical stuff, and we liked it, but I needed a scope and sequence for Jody to follow, and we didn't have that classical back then. So my nephew's in classical conversations. Lots of friends have been in it. I've helped coach people that have started classical conversation efforts. Okay. I like them. I like everything where people learn. I can even like schools if people are really learning. If they're not learning, I don't like it. Here's where I struggle. This is if it's homeschooling, um, all these co-ops and all aren't exactly homeschools. They're different versions of schools. Parent involvement's different, and the degree which they're involved. My brother and sister-in-law have been very involved in classical conversations. And I guess what I'm saying is I'm cheering for you. If that's a match, if you don't have the discipline at home, don't have a vision for how you're going to really equip the kids, that's great. I would just have found it incredibly inefficient. Okay, and when we had this, we started a classical model school, and the kids could have gone there free because I was teaching at it. And they went, and what happened is it slowed them down. They spent their time tutoring their friends, and they just wanted the fellowship because they found at school they could move faster, get their day done. They were done by 12:30 and had the whole afternoon free, and still wound up doing great in college and life. So I think it depends on what you're wrestling with. My way of thinking, if you can pull off homeschool and really do it right, what you can teach in character and allowing kids to go at their own pace, etc., I think it's just golden, just golden. But some of us can't do that. Work, time, energy, health, all kinds of things. And so things like classical conversations, I think can certainly be great. So let's see. Training for eternity at Gmail. Oh, y'all are giving me. Okay, let me restate this. I apologize. Email me. Let's just do Fred Ray Librand at yahoo.com. So Fred Ray Librand at yahoo.com. Email me so I can email you back, and that'll be easier for me. I'll find the document and send it. I should have posted. I probably will next time. But if you find that helpful in Bible study, a lot of people have, and I think it'll work well. What do you think of programs such as a Becca video program? It's a similar thing to the classical conversation, but videos, any mechanism you can use to learn is fine. But here's a philosophical difference. So the way we thought was it's a skill development. We're trying to get the kids ready to be adults. So we want them to learn how to learn. And my feel about Abeka and some of these other things are given a lot of knowledge and content. And by default, you develop skills. But in our way of thinking, we really wanted them to wrestle with the books. And it wasn't about us lecturing. Jody and I, we spent 30 minutes a day grading some writing, some math, looking at some things, talking to them a little bit about the book, having them debrief with us. We did not spend much time at all, especially as they age, because we were busy getting them to teach themselves. So Abeka and a lot of what happened with the public schools and the teachers trying to come on and lecture and all the rest of that stuff, it's kind of an orientation I am not excited about. I do think it can work with a talented speaker and for adult level learning, but in skill development, I think you're really just wanting kids to learn how to teach themselves to work hard at reading, hard at writing, and hard at math, and you want to give them feedback. So my kind of crazy orientation there. All right, I got thank yous. Those are exciting. Wow, we've gone 40 minutes. That felt like 4. What else is on your mind? This is stuff I love to think about. I give you my view. We're all trying to figure it out. I remember, my views change. I remember for some time I was really persnickety about printing. And then I don't know who challenged me on that. And then I went back and rethought it. And I do think teaching kids cursive makes so much more sense because printing is so challenging. You really need good tweezer dexterity. And kids aren't necessarily good at that at first. So as I rethought it, I realized, oh yeah, cursive, they're getting to make all the motions and learn it. And so we found, when people do cursive and can master it, it leads to much better skill and writing and printing, etc. Maybe exceptions to that, but I'm saying I'm willing to rethink things. I promise you. So there's that. So Elizabeth's throwing out. Now y'all are getting just darn near mean. Because of abortion, transgenderism, etc. But let's start back. Now you're not mean. These are good questions and ones we all are going to face. You think children ministry is necessary? You think children, I guess it's children's ministry, or should children be with their parents in the church service? All right, so let's take that one. It's tricky in that it depends on what you're trying to accomplish or do. So like, with kids being in church when they're really young, infants maybe are okay, but toddlers, that's pretty challenging. So toddlers playing together, getting a little Bible, having fun, burning some energy, allowing mom and dad to really get some instruction. And it's got to be a good, like, toddler game, so mom and dad aren't worried about their kid, so in church, in that kind of context, that stuff works. We had children's ministries, partly because we had lots of parents that just didn't know what they're doing, so we're kind of supplemented. Same with youth ministry type stuff. However, the research I'm familiar with tells us that the longest term influence on kids in the faith, staying in the faith, is related to overlapping with generations. So when they learn to worship with the older and younger, and some old hymns and young hymns, and they learn to do things with older people and young people. And by the way, this is important. Older people love to see young people in the faith because that motivates them to say there's hope for the future. And young people, if they're smart, like older people in the faith, because they can learn some wisdom instead of having to learn all the lessons firsthand. But, this question, should they be with parents in church service? That's certainly what we did. They had Sunday school, but our kids were always in church service. And I'll tell you this, when we were in church service and we sat together, we always made sure Jody and I sat by each other and the kids were around us. I know it's common to herd them in, you get on each end, but we were trying to model to the kids that the marriage was more important, that it was strategic, that we're a circle of two. That's actually the healthiest way, I think, to parent. You almost don't need to know about parenting if you have a good marriage relationship, because of the way it affects things. Well, a dysfunctional marriage relationship is tough. If you're divorced, having that relationship good is way better on the health of the kids than that relationship bad. So we would sit by each other, do the same at dinner. We'd sit by each other at dinner, the kids' other places around the table, so that we didn't have the her on one end, me the other, battle. Those are in opposition as far as it goes. But our experience was having the kids, when they're old enough to be in church. Now, I also will tell you this, the kids, now I was preaching most of the time, so I didn't like them disturbing me, but they were allowed to do whatever they wanted to during that time. So if they like to draw, there's studies on this. You can literally listen to a lecture and write about something else, and you'll remember more of the lecture. There's something about like freeing up your mind, like when it tries too hard and wonders, it's wondering anyway, but it's allowing information is. So if they drew, they want to draw pictures or doodle or whatever they want to do, that was all totally fine, because we're playing the long game. You're getting a lot of information over a lot of years. Age to introduce cultural issues like abortion and transgenderism. So let me start with sex. When do you teach your kids about sex? So this is important. Kind of the trick is you want to teach them before their friends do, and that gets harder and harder. With our kids, we had an orientation that said when they ask about it, we'd tell them about sex, and if they hadn't asked by the age of 9, we would initiate the conversation, tell them what sex was. And even recently, we worked with some folks, and that parameter is still pretty good. So if they ask about it, you've got to talk about it. Now, it needs to be age appropriate. I remember Trip one time, I shouldn't say his name, one of our kids, the oldest, one time was driving along and says, I know what sex is about. I said, really? He was like 5 or something. I said, it's how, I think he said it's boys and girls kissing, I think. And I said, well, it's about more than that. It's also where babies come from. And he looked at me and he went, well, I didn't know that, And there have been other questions, that he and others of the kids had that they weren't quite ready for. It was too young. And we didn't discuss that anymore. But when they get older and they've heard this and done that, when you have an open conversation, that's a beautiful moment to share with them. And I think it's going to go along with the same thing. Your issues, abortion is a little easier to process once they know about babies and mom. They know that sort of stuff. And just depending on your orientation. So abortion is a conflict of values. So if you value the woman's right to choose decisions related to her life and body over the baby's, you'll be pro-abortion. If you elevate the baby's right to live, to be born as an individual over the mom's right, then you won't be pro-abortion. That's that game and that conversation. And so it's quite a tricky thing. I think where we're going to wind up with it is there's eventually going to be, like Europe has, look, there's a boundary at which maybe it's 10 weeks, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 6, maybe it's fetal heartbeat. But there's a boundary at which we go, yeah, this thing is moving along to be a separate, unique individual. And so you've got a window in here that it's permitted, but a window after which it's not. And some of the absolutist thinking we all do, and we may be right, just as problematical in trying to solve it. So that's my thought. How would you structure your homeschool if you lived in a state that required 6.5 hours of class time per day? I don't think I would structure it much different than how we did. I think what I would probably try to figure out is I'd want, ours was basically 5.5 hours, 7 to about 12:30 or 1, something like that. So we were pretty close to it. That extra amount of time, I think I would do something might be a little more passive for them, so that still could be useful, like the Great Books courses. They might listen to one on the history of music, or you can get them online, etc. So I might supplement some time in there that it's not as punishing, and it might be a wind down thing for them in the day or later in the day. Maybe I might move that hour late to the pit hour, right before supper when they're all in the way. And so maybe that's a piece that keeps them, busy with that. But I don't know. It's a interesting question. It's not what we encountered, but I think you just try to fill it up. We like to get most of the schoolwork done in the morning. So I'd have to know their definition of class time, how we prove it, what the follow-up is. But I think I'd try to work with the laws of the state. Just be creative. All right. So I got a few more minutes. Any other questions? Let's see if I've got a cool one. Ooh, how can I tailor my child's education to their individual interests and learning styles? So this is an interesting topic. individual learning styles and interests. Interests are one thing, learning styles are another. Per se, the research is suspect on if there's really learning styles. There's certainly strong things like extroverts and introverts, and people are more conscientious than others. The traditional VAC, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, are you a visual learner, auditory, kinesthetic learner? Not really a thing. Everybody is somewhat kinesthetic and auditory and visual. What you're wanting to do is develop all those things. Like you're right-handed. Let's say you're right-handed. I was left-handed, changed over. But let's say you're right-handed. Does that mean not to use your left hand at all? No, you want to optimize your left hand too. So learning styles themselves, you want to engage the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic. You want all of them. And different people have gotten famous for different things. Montessori with the hands-on stuff has dramatically helped students. Some people can listen to tapes easier than they can read, etc. But what you're wanting to do is build flexibility into that child. So when they need to be visual, they can do it. When they need to be auditory, they can do it. When they need to be kinesthetic, they can do it. They may have a hierarchy of ordering, but I wouldn't worry about that. About their interests, now that's a trick, but the interests are going to be probably on the hobby level or afterwards, because school is not fun necessarily. So when I was in seminary, we had to read 3,000 pages per semester of books. I estimated one time. And I found that I didn't like a lot of those books. They were dry and painful, but I had to read them, right? So I would read about 10 other books that I really wanted to read in free time so I could tolerate reading the other 3,000 pages I had to read for class. I know that sounds crazy, but that optimizes learning. So if they have interests in certain things, and we did all kinds of extracurricular, art and sports and scouts and whatever, but those interests, if you can integrate them so you can substitute a book they're studying on something they're interested in, great, do it. They love horses, great. Put a horse book in there. Let them read a few more, put another horse book in there. But don't underplay the value of them reading, studying, learning, pursuing stuff outside of class. That just multiplies their learning. Okay, got a few more questions. Let's see. I'm struggling with energy depletion after homeschooling my 10 and 9-year-old. Really? That's the first time I've ever heard that. Really? The 10 and 9-year-old tiring? That's strange. They depend on me a great deal to explain the work and keep them on task. Any idea on how to instill self-motivation? Yeah. So, you're probably teaching them. And what you want to do is turn them into the teachers. You want to be the CLO, the Chief Learning Officer. Okay. So your goal, and you might want to write this down, your goal as an educator in this context is to cause them to learn. Not teach them, cause them to learn. And so what you're wanting to do with them as they depend on you to explain the work and keep them on task, this works if you have a limited period of time in which they can do their work. So if they have only so much time to read, they need to complete their reading. If not, they have to do it in the afternoon. Same with math, same with whatever. This dynamic where we just drag it out and drag it out and drag it out for hours to try to get it finished doesn't work. They need that time limit. And we've talked about this in some of the earlier Fridays. If you want to go back and listen, I think I talked about in the first one a good bit. So instead of explaining the work and keeping them on task, what you want to do is get them to explain to you. So my kids would come with a math problem and they say, I don't understand the math. And I'd say, well, read it to me out loud. And the explanation, they'd pull it out and they'd read it to me. And usually they'd go, oh, because they finally heard it. But if they didn't, I'd say, well, work the problem, but talk out loud how you're doing it. And as they talked out loud, they'll often solve it themselves. And then if they needed help, I'd tweak it, show them how it worked. But what I found in time is that all my kids didn't want to spend time teaching themselves and this old man, their dad, too, because that's what it turned into. I was causing them to learn. I was not going to be their teacher. They're their teacher. So how do I set it up? And once you get this mindset, you'll start figuring out some things. Keeping them on task is just a function of positive consequence for finishing, negative consequence for not finishing, and that self-motivation comes about when they understand the game. Look, just start with the math. They have so much math to do in whatever period of time. Let's say it's an hour. You have so many problems. If that's fair, that's fair. If they get finished, they're through. If they don't get finished, we stop, move to the next subject, but they're going to have to spend time in the afternoon, however long they want to take, to finish their math. In a few days, they're going to do their math. That's going to be the way that thing goes. In our curriculum, we have a course called How to Homeschool in 30 Minutes a Day. So you can go to independenthomeschool.com. You can find it. It's $9.95 a month for 12 courses. That's one of the courses, 50, 60 hours of instruction. Last of the good deals. Hope that helps. I really do hope that helps. Is it possible to teach beginning coding without technology? Probably not. It's a good question, but probably not. Because I've got two kids that code. I probably ought to ask them. But the problem with coding is you need a feedback loop really quick to make sure it works or where the bugs are. So I think that'd be challenging, but that's not my expertise. I'll ponder that. I'll get back with you. Will this live be available later? I'll come back to that. This will be on replay later today. When I say energy depletion, I mean mine. Oh, well, yeah, I know. Your energy depletion is because you're doing all the teaching. So stop it. Cause them to learn. You want to model for them. You could be studying by them. You could be reading something. You could be straightening up something. You can model to them, I'm doing work too, but they need to be doing their work. You do your work. You're probably caught in them teaching you so they can blame you. And you want to get out of that. You want them to learn. You might have to back up a little bit. They may not know some stuff and you've just been doing all the math for them. I'm picking on math. So you got to back up. Even if they're having problems reading, make them read out loud to you. Just do that for 10 minutes. That's them teaching themselves how to read, not you reading it for them. So your energy will come back, like the 30 minutes a day thing is all about that, by building systems and processes that you can rely on. Exhaustion usually comes because we're making too many decisions in a day. The more we can take decisions away, the more energy we'll have. If you know what you're going to have for dinner each night of the week, it's a help. If you know when laundry day is, it's a help. Just having some systematic routines. I'm not saying be a robot, but I am saying have things that are no longer decisions. I'm not deciding if I'm going to do laundry today. I'm doing laundry. It's Thursday or whatever the game is. All right. Smiley face. And will this be live? Yes, it'll be live. It'll be on YouTube for sure. So just look for wherever our YouTube channel is. It's on here. Fred Lybrand, YouTube. I think if you do Fred Ray Lybrand at the end, that'll go straight to it. If you look up my name, Fred Ray Lybrand, YouTube, you're going to find it. I'm the only Fred Ray Lybrand on the planet online. So that's always fun. Let's see. Love that technique. Yes, makes sense. I'm reading your independent homeschool book right now and eager to get to 30-minute teaching a day. Oh, thank you. Well, great. And yeah, this is how it works, how humans are. It also, when you set it up this way with some processes and patterns and time limits, you're actually training them if they were to go in. A lot of jobs are this way, but certainly any of them that pursue college is going to be the same thing. You got a certain amount of time. You got stuff you got to get done. You got to learn to take a test within a time limit. You got to learn to get a project done, etc. So they're all that way. All right, it's 11:30. This has been super. Thank you so much for your questions. Hey, subscribe to that YouTube, and it'll let you know when it's happening. Tell your friends about it. I'll be here next Friday, and we'll just take on more questions. Hope you have a great weekend.